debt crisis in 2008. What was the government solution? To have more debt. Well, if we had a crisis in '08 because we had too much debt, and if we have so much more debt now, how much worse is this crisis going to be? I mean, Greenspan only kept rates at 1% for about a year and a half, and then it took about another year and a half to get back up to 5. We had rates at 0 for 6-7 years. We never got them back up to normal. It took like 3 years to get back to 2.5%, and then it took a year to get back to 0, and we're never going off 0 now until the market forces us, which answers your question. What do people have to look at? You got to look at the price of gold, which is already going up, but at some point it's going to go up much faster. You got to look at the exchange rate of the US dollar versus other currencies. Now, right now, the dollar is stable, right? But it's not going to stay stable for long. At some point, the dollar is going to fall. And then you got to look at long-term interest rates, right? Wait for long-term interest rates to really start spiking higher. That is ultimately going to happen. Now, if you wait for those three things to happen, a big move up in gold, a plunge in the dollar, and a sharp increase in long-term interest rates, it's too late to do anything about it financially. I mean, you've missed the boat. What you've got to do now, what I've done personally, what I'm helping my clients do, is get out of U.S. financial assets, get out of the dollar, get out of U.S. bonds before that crisis. But once the market finally reacts, right? Jerome Powell yesterday said that now is not the time. He was at a press conference after they left rates at 0. And he was asked about the debt. Are you worried about the debt, which is exploding at an unprecedented rate? And his response was, no, I'm not worried. Now's not the time to worry about the debt. Of course, he's never worried about the debt. That's the problem. And we never want to fix the debt when times are good. And then when times are bad, we say we can't worry about the debt now. And so we got to make the debt bigger and bigger. But when the market finally worries about it, because, you know, if the central bank is worried about the debt, then that's good. Maybe the markets don't have to. But if the chairman of the Federal Reserve says the Fed is not worried about the debt and actually is encouraging the government to take on more debt, that's when the markets ought to really worry about that debt, because it's going to run out of control. And when the markets put a brake on the debt, right, by we're not buying these treasuries, we're not holding these dollars, and you start to see the dollar crashing, bond prices moving up, right, the stagflation really comes fully into play, then that's when the party's over, right? That's when the Fed is forced to make the decision that it has been reluctant to make for a decade or two, and it keeps kicking the can down the road. But when it finally has no choice, because we're about to see a sovereign debt crisis, we're about to see hyperinflation, where the value of the dollar is completely destroyed, right? And everybody, you know, wants to think that we're going to get all this government for free, right? We're not raising taxes, we're cutting taxes, but everybody's getting a bailout, everybody's getting a check, and nobody is asking, who's paying for it, right? Government has to be paid for. Now, the government can fund its operations honestly through taxation, where it actually takes money away from some people and gives it to other people, or it can do it dishonestly, the way it's doing now through inflation. Have the Federal Reserve create money out of thin air and just give it to people, just spend it into circulation. But when the Fed does that, you're not getting that government for free. That means that people that already have dollars in savings, in annuities, in pensions, under their mattress, wherever you have dollars, those dollars lose their purchasing power. And that purchasing power is transferred to the people who are receiving the government money. So instead of the government taking your money, the government is taking the purchasing power from your money. So that's who's going to get paid. I mean, you're going to be stuck with this bill. If you have savings, if you've got a portfolio of bonds, or you've got an annuity or cash value in an insurance policy, or you're working for wages, the value of what you earn is about to collapse, in that the cost of living is about to explode, and that's how we're paying for this. But the choice that the Federal Reserve is going to have to make when the markets finally take away the punch bowl, that the Fed should have taken away on its own, but when the markets force this decision on the Fed, then the Fed's going to have to do one of two things. Let interest rates go way up, and they're going to have to go much higher than they would have gone had the Fed let them go up before. Remember, when Volcker did the right thing, who was the last Fed chairman to ever do the right thing, the market pushed interest rates up to 20%. I would say that they're going to go higher this time than 20%. Now, imagine that, because we couldn't even survive 2.5%. The Fed had to start cutting. Imagine what happens to this over-leveraged economy at 20% rates. I mean, even at 10% rates or 5% rates, imagine what happens. So what would actually happen is massive default on an unprecedented scale, including the U.S. government. If the Federal Reserve does the right thing, the U.S. government will be forced to default on treasuries. It will not be able to pay the interest on the debt. It will not be able to obviously pay the principal. And it will have to default on its commitments to pay people Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits. I mean, it's going to be a wave of defaults on an unprecedented level, massive bankruptcies, massive collapses. That's if the Fed does the right thing. But
that's the problem, though. I mean, if you think about that, here's what, if you think about that, this is what it seems like is happening. You said gold, exchange of rate, U.S., obviously the currency, and a long-term interest rates, and I'll get to a second part of the question here, is in order for the person to do the right thing, so let's just say we know what the right thing is to campaign on, okay? So imagine I'm running for office, and this is my campaign. We need to stop spending money. We need to have the 40% of businesses that are too, the people that don't have the finances in order. Some of these guys need to get filtered out. We need to figure out a way to pay off our debt. And in doing so, we need to raise the taxes. No one's going to vote for this person.
Well, look, yes, freedom, capitalism, liberty is a lousy campaign slogan. People don't vote for freedom. They vote for free stuff. That is the problem. Look, the founding fathers knew this. That's why America was created as a republic. They knew if we were a democracy, we would collapse. So they protected us from democracy with the Republican form of government that they created. And they bound the government in the chains of the Constitution. And it worked for a long time. We were incredibly free throughout the 19th century. I mean, the most prosperous period of American history, of world history, was probably the end of the Civil War to the beginning of the First World War. That's when we had the smallest government, the purest gold standard. We really were, following the Constitution, and we prospered. But yes, it is very difficult when now everybody is voting, and the government in particular has crippled so many people, and now they have the crutch. And people don't realize that they're crippled because of the government. All they see is the government offering a crutch, and they want that crutch. And look, you look at the example of student loans. I mean, this is one of the most obvious examples of a government-created problem. I ran for Senate in Connecticut in 2010, and I was against student loans. I wanted to abolish all government-guaranteed student loans and all student loans. And before the government got involved in student loans, which it didn't always do, it really started with the GI Bill in the Second World War, but that was just to help the soldiers who were returning from the war. They really started getting involved in the 60s. So before that, if you wanted to go to college, you just paid for it. And it wasn't expensive. College, believe it or not, was not expensive before the government came in to help make it affordable. If your parents were relatively rich, they just wrote a check. If they were upper class, if your parents were lower middle class or middle class, maybe you got a summer job. That's what my dad did. My dad went to college. He grew up, his parents were relatively poor. He worked his way through college like most of his friends by waiting tables over the summer. That's it. He graduated college, no debt, right? And he, and he lived away from home, but he was able to earn enough just getting tips on a summer job to put himself through college. But what happened is a bunch of politicians came to the students in the 1960s and said, you shouldn't have to work over the summers. You should enjoy your summers. You should be going to the beach and having fun. We'll let you borrow the money, right, to go to college and just pay it back after you graduate when you have a better job and you can earn more money. And the students were, oh, that sounds great. I can have fun this summer. I don't have to work. The government's going to give me this loan. Now, of course, without the government guarantees, the students couldn't borrow the money because they had no collateral. What bank is going to loan money to an 18-year-old? So they couldn't have got the loans. But once the government guaranteed the loans, then anybody could get the loans. So the minute the kids had all this money to go to college and bid up the prices, the universities were like, oh, wow, we can really raise prices now because the students can borrow the money from the government and give it to us. So the minute the government started guaranteeing student loans, tuition has started to explode. And then as the tuition got higher and higher, the government had to provide bigger and bigger loans to pay for it. And then it became a self-perpetuating spiral. The more money the government made available to students, the higher the tuition got, to the point that now the students are graduating with a crippling amount of debt. Whereas they used to graduate debt-free when the government wasn't involved at all, now they're graduating with massive debt. And the irony of it is you see these Democrats, right, in these debates pointing to this huge problem without admitting that the government is the only reason those student loans exist. Without those student loans, college would be cheap and students wouldn't have any debt. But because of government interference, the cost of a college degree went through the roof. And because everybody has a college degree now, they're worth nothing. Before the government was involved, most people didn't go to college. A high school degree was all you needed. Now, because everybody goes, you need a college degree to do what you used to be able to do with a high school degree. Now you got to get a master's or a PhD. But by the time you borrow all the money to get that, and you're in school into your early 30s, right? You're in debt up to your eyebrows. All this is because of government. Now, what are these guys saying? Are they saying, oh, we really screwed up here? We had good intentions, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and now we need to get government out of the student loan business completely? We need to have free market capitalism working so that colleges are under competitive pressures to control their costs to get customers? Like everybody, no. Now the solution is completely nationalize it. Have the government pay for college. Let's make college free. Let's forgive all the loans. So now they want to make college even more expensive by making it free. Right? The most expensive things are the stuff you get from the government for free. So they jacked up the cost by subsidizing it. Now they want to make it even more expensive by providing it for free. They did the same thing with housing. They did the same thing with healthcare. Every aspect of the economy that the government gets involved in, they screw it up. They make the price go up and the quality go down. Whereas when the free market is involved, the opposite happens. Prices go down and quality goes up. But I got to finish the point I was making on the choice that the Fed has. Either they do the right thing and let interest rates go up and the whole house of cards that they've been building crashes down, or they don't do that because it's too politically difficult. And they just print money. They just continue the QE, they bail out everybody, and they destroy the dollar. And then the dollar is worthless. And then if they do that, right, a hyperinflation is much worse economically than just a massive economic collapse, right? The pain that will inflict is going to be far greater. But because it may happen 6 months or a year later or 2 years later, who knows, that may be the course that we end up taking.
So again,